God bless you. So let's appreciate Pastor Johnson Chukwu as he comes to take us higher. Let's clap for Jesus. Amen. Thank you, sir. Keep clapping, keep clapping.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Pastor Heidi. Thank you, Pastor Siju. Most important, I want to thank Pastor Heidi for the wisdom that made him say we have to also share, not just the word of God, but also as directed on how to deal with our economic issues. So thank you, sir. I also want to thank every member of the City of David, where the love of God reigns and dreams come true. It's an interesting thing because when I was asked to speak on this, in fact, it was coincidental. We were just discussing in his pastor's office, and he said, look, why don't you come and talk on this, on the economy? And prior to that, we were already in the Amen fellowship, and we were already discussing having this conversation. So he said we'd rather have it in the general church. So I pray that God will minister to each and every one of us. God will open your minds and give you direction on how to deal with the current economic environment. And I also pray that this morning you're going to recognize the sounds of abundance of rain. And that each and every one of us will eat of the fruits of the success of this country that is coming in the near future. I have a short presentation, which I called Nigeria's Economic Transition, the Challenges and Opportunities. And I have to start with the challenges because many of us are so worried. I'm wondering how this economy is going to impact on them. Or it's already impacting on most of us. But I want to dwell largely on the opportunities. And like I said, I pray that God will open your mind and show you the opportunity around you. God will lead you this morning to your Goshen. So, obviously it's not showing the figures, but if you look at this slide, it's actually supposed to show you how our population has actually grown. What I have done is to show us who we are as a country. Because you also understand the peculiarities of the country to begin to know how to take advantage of the opportunities available. In 2020, the population of this country was only 160 million. Today, we are 218 million. We've grown by almost 60 million in the past 12 years. And it's expected that we will grow further to about 223 million by the end of this year. Why am I talking about population? Because the population is where you have the market. And like I always tell people that the opportunities of a big populated country, you have a huge market. And just to bring it home, if you sell a product that you make only 1 naira, and that your product is a product that is consumed by 10% of the Nigerian population, 10% of the Nigerian population is 20 million. So if they take only 1 unit of your product once a month, and your profit margin is 1 naira, every month you make 20 million naira. And that's the opportunity, just to give you an idea why I have to mention the population. Next slide. Then you look at the demography. If you look at the demography of Nigeria, you realize that 54% of the 218 million people are within the age of 0 and 14. What does this speak of? It means that if you have to be in business, you have to be in business that attend to the needs of the larger population of the country. And that's why schools will continue to prosper. Items that relate to children will continue to prosper, no matter what happens in the economy. And I'm saying this so that, like I said, God is going to minister to you so you can see where you fit into the economy, where you can take advantage of the economy. In terms of gender, 51% of Nigerians are female. You can also understand why hairdressing, fashion designing, lipstick making, cosmetics will remain viable business in the country. Next slide. Okay, this is the distribution of the Nigerian population. Previously, in 1955, just about 15%, less than 15% of Nigerian population were living in urban areas. Almost 90% were living in rural areas. Today, 51% of Nigerian population live in the urban areas. And 49% live in the rural areas. So that also talk about what you can provide to where you have a density, high population density, where you have a high concentration of people. It also reminds you why we're having pressure in some areas like power supply, because we've not been able to scale up as more and more people migrate to the urban areas. Remember, just in 2010, a couple of years back, we were only 160 million people. Today, we are 218 million. Next, I'll just rush through this segment and then take us to the segment that I think will be most important to us. This is about our GDP. Our GDP, there's the total size of Nigerian economy, the value of goods and services produced in the country. In 2014, peaked at $574 billion. Today, as at the end of last year, it had dropped to $477 billion. With the devaluation, it's expected to drop materially further in the current year. So by the next report you will observe that Egypt and South Africa may have overtaken Nigeria in terms of being the largest economy in Africa. But the opportunity for us to grow back because we have the base, we have that population. Next. Now, this shows you why we are feeling the pinch, why we're feeling the shoes. Our population has been growing an average of almost 3%. And if you look at that GDP figure, the bars, it shows how our economy has been growing year in, year out. So when your population is growing at an average rate above your economic growth rate, what happens? You are producing fewer goods than the number of people you are bringing to life who are living on those goods. It's just like you have 5 tubers of yam and you have 5 kids. Automatically, each kid will be entitled to 1 tuber of yam. But if you double the size of your children to 10, each child will only get half tuber of yam. Unless you grow your farming capacity to now grow 10 tubers of yam. So once the economy is growing at a rate less than the population growth rate, the standard of living of the average citizen begins to deteriorate. And because you have catch-up, because your population is growing cumulatively year on year, year out. If it's 200% now, if it's 200 million now, and this last year it grew at 2.41%, so it then means that you add another 4.6 million people, and then you move to something like 223 million. It will be another addition. So once you have a slack in your growth rate, you need now to grow at a much faster rate than the population growth rate to close that gap. Let's go to the next. This is your per capita GDP. That is when you divide the quantity, the entire monetary value of goods and services produced in the country by the number of citizens of our population. So because the GDP was growing at a rate, just like I explained now, less than the rate our population is growing, when you split it equally, then the value that each of us is entitled to reduces. So as at last year, if you share the Nigerian wealth to each and every one of us will get $2,000. The best we had was in 2014 when each of us could get as much as $3,000 or $3,200. Next, because I want us to move quickly and move to the segment that will interest many of us. This is just to show you some of the problems that is leading to the challenge you have, one of which is the issue of governance, how the government manages the affairs of the country. I just pick 2 items there. If you look at what I call non-debt recurrent expenditure, what this means that the cost government incurs to pay salaries to government employees, National Assembly members, fuel their cars, hire private jets, drive around the country. In 2015, that amount was 2.59 trillion naira. By the time we got to 2021, it had moved to 8.7 trillion naira. 2022 is not complete because this is at November. That budget, they have extended it to this time. So the budget is still running. So we don't have the figures for full year because they extended the budget, which they are running 2022 budget and running 2023 budget and running supplementary budget for 2022. They are all running parallel. So we don't have the full figure, but we have the figure as at November. But even if you look at that November figure, because they didn't have money, so they had to defer a lot of payments, which they have now uploaded. That November, as at November, we had the total revenue that federal government received was 6.5 trillion naira. By January to November, we had spent 5.24 trillion naira on debt service. That was 80% of federal government revenue was spent to pay interest on the loans that the government had borrowed. And then another 5 trillion naira was spent to run the government. So in effect, short of just about 1 trillion naira, every money the government spent to run its affairs was borrowed. So, and that's why if you look at what you call deficit, those are the amount that the government has to borrow year in, year out. And that is why debt service has been ballooning. And if you look at that figure, you will see in 2015, our total debt service, total amount of interest we paid as a country was 950 billion. By the time we got to just November last year, we had paid 5.24 trillion naira. So that you know where the problems are coming from. And I will come to the solutions. So this is to show you, particularly for those who want to go into business, where the meat is. 64% of expenditure in the country is by households. You and I. Consumption expenditure is by households. So if you are targeting businesses, target the households. They are the ones who are actually incurring expenses, who actually consume in the country. The government's net government consumption is only 4%. Companies and other entities consume about 32% of final goods. Now let's go to the sectors that account for a large chunk of our business, our economy. If you look at that, and because for us, as children of God, we have to look at where are those sectors where there are opportunities. Agriculture accounts about 25% of our GDP. And I'm going to talk a lot more about agriculture and opportunities there. You have information and communication technology. It currently accounts for about 17.47%. It used to be an inconsequential part of the GDP, but today is the second largest contributor to GDP. And then you have trade. Then you have manufacturing, 10%, mining and quarry. That's where you have oil and gas. It had dropped to 6.2926%. It used to be almost 10% of the GDP. But we know what's happening in the oil and gas sector. Then the real estate business, 5.3%. Financial service and insurance, 5.3%. Construction, 4%. And then professional services, 3%. And then you have other services, just 3%. These are just to show you. Now, what are those factors that has influenced our weak economic performance? First, low or weak industrial base. What we have there is a picture of a textile industry in the country, a textile factory in the country. They have all been run down. If you are of my generation, you grew up in the 70s, you will observe that there's a place called Aswani in Lagos. We know that. All the textile industry have shut down. We were actually migrating into a manufacturing center. We had Volkswagen, we have Peugeot. But today, our industrial base has further collapsed. What does it mean? We have to import almost everything. So that exact pressure on our foreign exchange. The other factor that has led to where we are today is insecurity. You can see those men with guns and chains of weapons. It's almost all over the country. Probably Lagos is still the oasis of security in the country. But outside Lagos, I'm not sure you can drive comfortably from Lagos to Ilorin. We used to go, as a graduate, we used to go to Ado Ekiti. Then it was a sleepy town. We just want to go to Ikogosi. Today, I've been invited separately to attend weddings there, and I'm not sure I want to go there. Then you have a very wasteful fuel subsidy. And I'm very saying it with us subsidies because I know many people here may actually wish that the fuel subsidy is not removed. But it was a very wasteful. This is a picture of what we wear most times. It was sporadic. Now and then you have the fuel scarcity and the people go and queue and go through this process. And then I've mentioned to us the government wastages. The fact that we could grow our recorded expenditure, not the recorded expenditure, from 2 trillion to 8 trillion within a period of less than 10 years. Now, what are the other factors? The monetary policies. That is the policies that the central bank uses to manage productive activities in the country. The way they manage exchange rate, interest rate, has been very upper queue in the past couple of years. That has stymied foreign capital inflow into the country. It has discouraged some limit of productive activities. And then you have the fiscal policies. Government has been borrowing from the central bank. We saw the level of borrowing there. Then you have the global economic impact, which affects every one of us. Then you have the war, the recent war, ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. All these things have had direct impact on our economy as individuals and as a people. Let's quickly. Then the compelling need for a cost change. I said here that Nigeria is like a guard dog on lease. It can only bark. We need to unshackle the country so that it can serve our collective interest. What are those necessary things we need to do? We need to remove unproductive subsidies. Subsidy on fuel. There's nothing wrong with subsidy because I was a speaker at the World Bank Nigerian Economic Update on Thursday. And one of the questions I was asked is, every country has subsidy. So why can't we have subsidy on petroleum products? I said, yes, there's nothing wrong with subsidy. The problem we have in our subsidy is that the target is not the one that is the beneficiary. And I explained that to us so that we, in as much as it's hurting us, we'll also realize the necessary measure that we need to take to unshackle the country. The target of fuel subsidy is supposed to be the poor. And sometimes the government, when they say the poor does not have cars, if you go to that distribution of population, 49% of Nigerians live in the rural areas. Those people that live in the rural areas hardly have a need to buy fuel. They hardly commute. So, and they are the extreme poor.
Sorry, there are going to be time for asking questions, so you can write your questions down as you go.
And they are the extreme poor. So, the fuel subsidy doesn't get to them. The urban poor go through buses. So they get some benefit of the subsidy. But the larger people who appropriate the subsidy are those of you here who have multiple SUV vehicles. So how do you target subsidy to the poor? What you need to do, which is what happens elsewhere in the world, you have an efficient public transport system. So if you have public buses, if you have rail system, but because we can't build a rail system immediately, but we can at least build the public buses, provide the public. We used to have Lagos State public transport vehicles. What will happen is that you can subsidize those buses. You can actually decide to give bus vouchers to the extremely poor and they won't pay a kobo. So the benefit of the subsidy goes to the people you are targeting. The average urban well-off will have to buy the fuel. And because the other multiplier impact of that, including the fact that our foreign exchange demand will decline because our consumption of fuel will also decline. But most importantly, it will incentivize local refineries to come up. Then we need to eliminate distortions in foreign exchange management. I have advocated repeatedly that the government needs to harmonize the exchange rates. And the government has done it. The only challenge is that the way it was done, it doesn't look like thorough preparation. Some of the things we had advocated that should go with it, we are done. So that's why we're having these kind of challenges we have today, because harmonizing the exchange area also requires that government must make sure the central bank must have capacity to clear arrears of unmet demand, so that those who have logged in losses will be able to at least access their funding, so they won't be panic in the market. But that was not done. That's why you are creating this kind of upheaval they have in the market. But it was a necessary measure, but not exactly done thoroughly. Then we need to reverse the deteriorating level of insecurities. The problem we have in inflation today is principally because we're not producing enough food. And Nigeria has the capacity to produce enough food. But when farmers can't go to their farms, there's no way they'll produce enough food. I'm running out of time. I'll go to the meat of it quickly. Issue of improving power supply. Go on. Go on, please. Modernizing our country transport infrastructure. These are generic facts we all know. Building world-class logistics infrastructure. The seaports and the airports are necessary for you to be a productive economy, for you to export, for you to bring in goods efficiently. Reviewing government approach to fund infrastructure. Here, the government does not have, if you look at what I said, government earned 6.5 trillion naira by November last year, spent 5 trillion naira on its own overhead, 5.24 trillion naira on debt service. So, and then borrowed to just spend about 1.8 trillion naira on infrastructure. As it stands today, we are the opinion that government should share a way, pull out from building infrastructure and bring in private capital to build it. The simple reason that whenever the government tries to go into infrastructure, there are a lot of wastages, including corruption that are built into it. So if you allow private, why would you borrow money to do something you cannot do efficiently and steal part of that money? So why don't we give it to private sector who will not steal from themselves, build the same infrastructure, we'll all use it, and we pay a tax, which we are already paying more because the part of the money that is supposed to have gone into it is stolen. So we know getting to the promised land is never an easy work. When Pastor Heidi was speaking about us going to Trinity Towers, speak a volume of that. So for us to move from where we are to where we should be, we should prepare for some difficulties, some inconveniences, some pains, which many of us are going through. But let's quickly go to those challenges we have. You have increased level of unemployment. You're going to see a further increase in level of employment. We're already talking about 33% unemployment level. You have a significant erosion of household purchasing power. Inflation and currency devaluation is impacting each and every one of us. So it's what we must prepare to go through. Decline in productive activity, GDP is going to drop. For the trade to corporate balance sheets, from foreign exchange losses, those of you in corporate business know, I think MTN declared a loss of 103 billion, 170 billion, Airtel 170 billion, MTN 103 billion, Dangote 900 something billion from exchange rate losses. And that is happening virtually all of them. So what are the other implications? That the government revenue will decline, there will be increase in non-performing loans because most of these people cannot be able to pay back those loans in order to meet the shortfall in the FX. Increase in crime level, possible industrial conflict. Labor is already threatening to go on strike. And then doctors have said they must go on the strike. Possible decline in. But we are peculiar people. When men are cast down, then what do we say? What do we say? All these things we're talking about. People are going through difficulties. We are completing the Trinity Towers. So, when men are cast down, what do we say? So, let's look at the opportunities. The Bible told us in the book of Ezekiel chapter 21 verse 27, it said, I will overturn it, and it shall be no more unto he whose right it is, and I will give it to him. So let us claim this, that even the upheaval we are witnessing today is going to be our interest. So let's deal with the specifics. Like I pray that God will minister to you so that you see opportunities beyond maybe what I'm presenting here, because whatever you practice, there's opportunity there. And the current economic upheaval has created new opportunities that we all have to take advantage of. My son is out to eat farming, and a friend of mine who used to work with Shell had resigned to go into farming, and he's doing vegetables. I have the pictures here, but I didn't upload it. The cost of imported food items will remain high. So what does that mean? The opportunities for greenhouse farming, farming of vegetables like mushrooms, farming of cereals like sweet corn, and these do not require so much of capital investment. And I'm saying this so that you can see, do you have a small garden that you can do this? Snail, poultry, piggery, other livestock, farming of tubers, yam, cassava. Are you aware that Nigerians are beginning to export tuber to UK? Yam tubers. Then technical skills. If you go to a place like England, if an electrician comes to your house for spend 1 hour, you know how much you pay. What is the reason? Because they have the technical competence. So you're going to see opportunities in electrical services, plumbing services, medicine, tiling. Interestingly, some of these things we are bringing people from Benin Republic and Cotonou to come and do for us. Nursing and midwifery. These are also exportable skills. If you are very good in this area, you don't need to be a graduate. You can actually migrate to England or Canada and provide these services and make so much money. So you have alternative energy supply. The guy who did my automation used to be a DSCV installer, but he has upscaled his skills and is now an automation expert. There will be need for people to install solar panels, inverter batteries in their homes. So if you can acquire these skills, you have unlimited opportunities and you will not feel the impact of the economic challenges. Outsourcing services. I went to England in June. A friend of mine whose wife, both of them work, junior friend of mine, but the wife is also a caterer. Weekends, when Nigerians are doing parties, they invite us, he caters for them. You can also do something. And I know a couple of church members here are also caterers. So you can do outsourcing services like catering services, logistics services like dispatch, and you can combine this with your 8 to 5 work. Security services, people are setting up security companies to provide outsourced services, call center management, crèche services, laundry services. You can be a young man and say you don't have anything to do. You can as well provide laundry services. And all you just need is get a good table to iron very well, get iron, and then you are in business. House cleaning and fumigation, technical education services. The schools will come up what they call the finishing schools, where they will equip people with the technical skills that we just discussed. Furniture making, building, catering services. I saw that there's Hida Bachi or Basi. They say she has made, is it 87 million or 187 million from people who are registering to be taught how to cook. So that creates opportunities for you. Fashion designing, shoemaking. But we're saying that people are going to set up schools to train people in those areas. Cottage industries, cosmetic manufacturing industry, food packaging, starch manufacturing, palm oil processing, vegetable oil. You don't need so much of industrial base or capital to do these things. You can produce butter and margarine. And let me tell you, starch, which is produced from cassava, is being exported. Many companies in the country need it and they need to import. Then, if you are into export, you can export unprocessed food to diaspora clusters. Like I said, we are already exporting yam to England. Then solid mineral export, agricultural products, and you can also export Nigerian fashion. IT services, your payment solutions, other business solutions, application development. A lot of Nigerians, young men here, have so much of IT skills. You need to convert it into commercial use. Next. For those who are into government contracts, there will be a lot of civil engineering and construction contracts. The simple reason that the governments at the state levels have more money than they used to have in naira value. So many of them will have the resources to engage contractors to go into civil work. What do they do? Roads, buildings, schools. And then, if you are also into construction, then you look at going into public-private partnership with the governments, such as supply of power supply. Now they have changed the law that the state government can actually produce power. So the state government will not have the capacity to go and get it, but they can actually go in with you and partner to provide power, what we call under localized environments, or what we call island mode. So you can provide power to just this segment of VI under an agreement with the state government. Water supply. Most households in Lagos do not have public water system. People are ready to pay for that if you go into PPP and they give you a right of way. Waste management, public transport buses, railway rolling stocks, coaches. So, as I conclude, Beloved, just like I said when I started, clearly, and I think it's Pastor Heidi that should pronounce this, I wish above all things that thou mayest prosper and be in health, even as your soul prospered. Paul said, I have planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the increase. So neither is he that planted anything, neither he that watered it, but God that giveth the increase. I pray that today God will increase your need.
Hallelujah. Before you come down, sir, I think the idea is to be able to take a few questions primarily. First question, sir. There's a question here that says, your thoughts on our population guesstimate. Is a census feasible so that we can plan development effectively? And then the second question from this person is, are there any low-hanging fruits, areas or sectors that we can invest in for short or medium-term gain? So the first question about census, the feasibility, and then the second about low-hanging fruits for us.
Okay, on the census feasibility, the census, what has happened in the census, the last census was 2006. So what the World Bank and NBS has done is to use the estimate of the annual growth rate of the population. At some point, up to 2012, we grew at 2.79%, and last year we grew at 2.41% in terms of population. You're looking at birth rate and death rate. So the estimate is based on what figures we had in 2006 and how the population has continued to grow. But basic thing about estimate of population, the demographics remains about the same. 54% of Nigerians are below the age of 14. Only just about 3% are 70 and above, which means, of course, we know our life expectancy is about 54 now for men, 53 for men, 54 for men and 55 for women. The women are supposed to outlive us by 1 year, on average. So when you look at that life expectancy and look at our birth rate and look at our death rate is about 80 per 1,000. And death rate is more than 20 per 1,000 births, because we still have high infant mortality. So in that wise, the population should be a basis for government to plan. Also, individuals to plan. Like I talked about opportunities in the economy, and it then means that you have to look at which segment of the population do you want to target. Then the second aspect of your question, are they low-hanging fruit where people can invest? Yes. They are money market instruments. You starting from your savings. The key thing is, if you have any money, don't leave it idle. It doesn't matter what income you get. It is better than being idle. So depending on how much you have and what time frame you have, you can put your money in savings, and even if they pay you 3%. But if it's bigger, you put it in fixed deposit. If it's much bigger, you put it in fixed income or tenured instruments, or you buy bond, federal government bond, or corporate bond. And if it's much bigger, you can also buy euro bond. You convert to dollar and hold your money assets in a currency that is not devaluing. And if it's much bigger, you can also invest in real estate. So there is that succession of investments. But before we advise anybody, we look at your age, your income level, your liquidity. We do a profiling of you before we. So it's not just, I have headache, okay, you have malaria. We give you malaria tablet. But the opportunities, some of them you can take on your own, starting from making sure that your investment is working. They also investment in equities, that is stock. But we also tell you that to invest in stock, you better get somebody who is an expert to hold your hand, so you don't invest wrongly.
All right, thank you, sir. I have two questions. One a comment and one a question related to agriculture. Somebody is saying that the idea of exporting unprocessed food is archaic, and that has led to dwindling effects. And he says that is what the ACA AFCFTA was set up to reverse. It says that Ghana buys a yam from Makurdi for next to nothing. They process it and they sell it to Europe. So they are the ones making the FX. That we should encourage our people to invest in processing, and that there's a huge opportunity in processing of agricultural produce. Another one related says, if you have 5,000 hectares of land for agriculture and agro-processing, how do you get crowdfunding for your project?
Okay, the first comment is, the person is right. Of course, processed exports, it creates more value. But you have to start from somewhere. Some of the challenges we have today, which is why the manufacturing sector is not working, because we have a lot of structural deficiencies, including power supply. And we don't have storage facilities. Some of these things, if you try to process and store, you will lose value. The greatest losses we have is at the farm gate, where what is produced don't get to the market. Because we don't have the transport infrastructure, you do not have the processing infrastructure. So, given your limitations, one of the things you do in your business, that you also define what you call SWOT, your strength, your weakness, your opportunities, and threats. So you know your limitation, you know your strength. Given where we are today, we can export the raw food items while we build the capacity to process.
Thank you, sir.
Then the other aspect of it is, if you have a 5,000 hectares, that's huge. If you have a 5,000 hectares of farmland, and how can you get crowdfunding? One of the things I always advise people is that in every business, start small. You need to start and have a proof of concept. You don't need to cultivate the 5,000 from day one. You can even do less than a hectare. And you can do drip irrigation, which is basically do a well, put solar panel-driven pumps, and then use the solar-driven pumps, which doesn't cost you fuel, to irrigate that to your small portion of land, and start with vegetable farming, what they call drip irrigation. So you just do pipe, and that pipe doesn't have to be iron pipe. You use plastic pipe,
PVC.
and then you irrigate it and start from there. Then you have a proof of concept, and you can see I'm producing profitably. Then you can now go to fund that and say, look, I am doing this, come and see what I'm doing, I need money to increase.
Thank you. Two FX-related questions. One is that the Economist Intelligence Unit predicts that Nigeria may return to a CBN-controlled exchange rate that may result in about 815 naira to the dollar by 2024. What is your view on this? And then he says, why does the government refuse to reduce government expenditure by implementing the Oronsoye report? Somebody else says, in view of the huge losses declared by blue chip companies due to changes in foreign exchange policy, how can a new business successfully thrive as it's expensive to start a business? The expenses to start a new business is back-breaking.
Okay, in the first place, let's have the first part of your question. The Economic Intelligence Unit says government may go back to manage exchange rate. I don't think that will happen. The government does not have the resources to go back to that. And it's because they lack that resource that led us where we are. And they acted in a haste. Unfortunately, in economic management, you have to engender confidence. But confidence will come from perception that you have capacity, even if you don't have capacity. But people must perceive that you have capacity for them to have confidence in you. You know, if you're a father, as the guy who sat beside me, the guy wearing white there, is so much taller than me, bigger than me. But within my child, if my child will be convinced I can beat him up. So that gives him the confidence that his father is strong. So you must have some level of capacity to have that confidence. But unfortunately, the government did not do, like I said, there were certain things which I don't think is for this audience that they did not do that should have stopped the exchange rate from depreciating. But I don't think the window of going back arises. Then, in terms of the losses by big corporates, when I talked about the upheavals, the overturn. What that means is that the events that has happened in the past has even put you, a small person, in their position, because what made them strong has been badly affected. I don't know what I'm saying. You get what I'm saying? So in effect, you have a very big man who has so much resource, and now his resource has shrunk, and then your own resource is unaffected. So it then means you're in a position to even do some of the things they do, which is why we are sharing this, because you have a clean balance sheet. You have not lost anything, though you are not as big as them. I think that takes the second aspect.
Thank you. No comments on the RCCG reports.
Pardon?
No comments on the RCCG report.
Okay, the RCCG report, the question, why has government not implemented it? Why I skipped it is because I'm not government now.
All right, sir.
So I can't answer for government. Right. What I know is that they have worsened the bad situation. They have made the bad situation worse.
Okay, I think one or two last questions. One person here says, can you shed more light on ICT, the impact of new technologies, for example, artificial intelligence? How can we leverage on digital skills to help mitigate unemployment challenges, especially with the youth? I don't know whether we've answered this before. Somebody is asking about how government can create an enabling environment for manufacturers.
Okay. Actually, at that engagement with the World Bank, one of the things I said that we need to do, we need to leverage on technology. And how do we leverage on technology? To reduce unemployment. We've talked about issues around outsourcing. Today, in Lagos and a number of cities, you have 5G internet services, which is the fastest internet service anywhere in the world. So we can also create clusters, or what you call outsourcing centers. It can be done by private individuals, by creating virtual offices. Government can also do that, creating virtual offices where they bring broadband internet to that locality. In England today, all public parks have internet services free. So what that means is that a young Nigerian who can be an outsourcing, a call center official working for a US company or any company in the world, he or she brings his laptop to that center and is able to work and upload data and zap data back to his employers. I have a friend whose wife works for a company in America. And then all she does is with her laptop every day, and she has her MiFi. So even if she travels, she will just take a excuse that won't be available for 1 hour. And once she lands and enters the car, she connects back. So we can leverage on IT to provide a lot of services. I'm not talking of IT skills, because I know a lot of young people here have IT skills. Flutter Wave of this world is worth billions today. There are several companies that started from Nigeria. Even Jumai, I don't know whether you know that Jumai started from Nigeria. Several opportunities for fintech services that Nigerians are latching on to. And they are getting millions of dollars of investment from foreign investors. So, and a lot of Nigerians, in fact, they say a hub in Yaba that is now like our own Silicon Valley. So these opportunities are there. For government, they can enhance it by just creating what you call incubation centers, and then provide all the people need is power supply and Wi-Fi, high-speed internet, and a lot of Nigerian youths can take advantage of it.
All right, sir. Thank you. Last question. Someone here is asking for advice. He says, should we save and trade in US dollar, seeing all this pressure on our exchange rates? And he also says arbitrage trading is good for youths to raise funds. Are there arbitrage opportunities for us to look out for?
Okay, let me say something about the depreciation of the currency, because this has brought that to the core. We've seen Naira depreciate to 800 something Naira to $1. The concerns are, where will it get to? There are two things that can moderate it. One is that, because it comes back to the question you just, one is that the government assesses balance sheet funding, balance of payment support from either IMF or a bilateral partner like US, British government, Chinese government, and they provide us maybe $50 billion that we can use to clear the arrears of unmet demand and then stabilize the exchange rate. If that doesn't happen, what will happen is you are going to see Naira depreciate to what we call an emotional, a psychological threshold. What is psychological threshold? You get to a point where demand will collapse further, so people will not have need to import because you can't afford imported items. Of course, standard of living will deteriorate further. And then you get to that point where people are saying, okay, it has already fallen, so it won't go beyond this. When they get to that point, it won't go beyond it, they stop buying. Those who are trying to front load will stop buying. And then because demand will stall and supply is still the same or will improve, then you begin to see Naira stabilize and possibly appreciate. That psychological threshold I can't define. It could be higher than what it is today, but something will happen like that if we continue that way. So in that wise, to the person who asked the question, your ability to arbitrage on the currency depends on how close we are to that psychological barrier. Because once we hit that psychological barrier, people will slow down, consumption will collapse, demand for FS will collapse, standard of living will deteriorate, but demand will slow down to the point that supply will begin to meet up demand. Thank you all, and God bless you.
Thank you.